Welcome to God's Kingdom, where every story brings you closer to God.
Let's dive into one of the most unlikely military victories in all of history. Seriously, this story turns everything you think you know about strength and courage completely on his head. It's the story of a man named Gideon, the reluctant warrior.
And that question is really at the heart of it all. What if the biggest wins don't come from the strongest people? We're about to meet Gideon, a man who, when we first see him, is literally hiding from his enemies. And yet, this is the guy who's going to lead a tiny band of 300 soldiers against an army so huge it was impossible to count. How on earth does that happen?
So, to really get Gideon, you first have to understand the world he was living in. And let me tell you, it was a total nightmare. This was a time of absolute terror and desperation for the people of Israel.
For 7 long years, the Midianites had been just crushing them. I mean, picture this. Every time you managed to grow some food, this massive invading army, described as being like a swarm of locusts, just sweeps in and takes everything. They destroy your crops, steal your animals, and leave you with absolutely nothing. People were starving, they were broken, and they were forced to hide out in caves and mountains just to stay alive. They had finally hit rock bottom.
So in this climate of absolute fear, who's going to step up? You'd probably expect some great hero, right? Someone sharpening their sword, ready for a fight. Well, that's not what happens. Instead, we find a man named Gideon hiding in a wine press, of all places, just trying to secretly thresh a little bit of wheat without the invaders seeing him.
And get this, it's right there, in that moment, while he is actively hiding, that an angel appears and greets him with these incredible words. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." The contrast is just, wow. A mighty warrior is probably the absolute last thing Gideon was feeling like at that moment.
And Gideon's reaction? Oh, it tells you everything you need to know. He doesn't stand up tall, he immediately pushes back, just full of doubt. He basically says, you've got the wrong guy. My family is the weakest one around, and in that family, yeah, I'm the bottom of the barrel. He saw zero warrior potential in himself. None.
And this really shows the massive conflict at the center of the story. On one side, you have this divine call that sees potential, that sees a mighty warrior. And on the other, you have the human reality, fear, doubt, and a feeling of being completely inadequate. How do you even begin to bridge a gap that big?
So you're Gideon. You've just been handed this impossible task, and you're crushed by self-doubt. You're going to need a little more than a pep talk, right? You're going to need some hard, undeniable proof that this mission is for real, and that you're not going into it alone.
This brings us to one of the most famous parts of the story, the test of the fleece. And it wasn't just one test, he asked for 2. First, he asks for something that just doesn't happen in nature. He puts out a wool fleece and asks for it to be soaked with dew, while the ground all around it stays bone dry. When that actually happens, he doubles down. He asks for the complete opposite, a totally dry fleece on a dew-covered ground. That's how deep his uncertainty was. Okay, so with his faith finally getting a boost from these signs, Gideon is ready. He puts out the call for an army, and people respond. But just as he starts to gain some confidence, he gets hit with his next test. And this one is a real head-scratcher.
So Gideon rallies the tribes and he assembles an army of 32,000 soldiers. Hey, that's a respectable force, right? You might think you've got a shot with that many men.
But then comes this statement that makes absolutely no sense. You have too many men. What? The logic, though, is pretty profound. The idea was that if Israel won with a huge army, they'd just pat themselves on the back and say, look how strong we are. The victory had to be so impossible that no one could take the credit for it.
So here's the first cut. Gideon announces that anyone who is afraid can just go home, and bam, just like that, more than 2/3 of the army leaves. He's left with only 10,000 men. And just when you think things can't get any more stressful, the message comes again. Even 10,000 is too many. Can you imagine what Gideon must have been feeling? The odds were already stacked against him, and now they're getting even worse. So a final test is done down by the water, designed to weed out all but the most ready soldiers. And the final number? 300. Just 300 men. I mean, let's be real, that's not an army. That's a small raiding party. And they're about to face a massive, battle-hardened horde. So, the stage is set. 300 men against an enemy so vast they filled the valley like locusts. It was pretty clear that their strategy couldn't rely on brute force or numbers. It had to be something else entirely. And their weapons? Oh, you are gonna love this. No swords, no spears. Nope, each soldier was given a trumpet, an empty clay jar, and a torch to hide inside of it. That's it.
This wasn't a plan for a physical fight, it was a brilliant strategy of psychological warfare designed to create maximum chaos and confusion.
So picture this, it's the middle of the night, pitch black. The 300 men surround the enemy camp. On Gideon's signal, they all blow their trumpets, smash their jars to create this deafening crash, and hold up their flaming torches. The Midianites wake up to this terrifying noise and a ring of light surrounding them from all sides, and they just panic. In the complete confusion, they actually start turning on each other, and the entire army just collapses from within, fleeing in absolute terror.
The victory was absolute. It was miraculous. And after this incredible triumph, the people of Israel, overjoyed and finally free, come to Gideon and offer him the highest honor they possibly can.
They ask him to be their king and to establish a dynasty for his family. But Gideon, the same man who started this whole thing feeling like the least of his family, shows his greatest strength right here. He refuses. He knows where the victory really came from, and he points the whole nation back in the right direction.
And when you boil it all down, the story of Gideon isn't just about an ancient battle. It's this profound lesson that true strength and victory often look like weakness. The most important wins aren't always achieved through our own power, but by making room for something far greater. And that really leaves us with a big question to think about in our own lives, doesn't it? When we're facing our own impossible odds, our own giant armies, where are we looking for strength? Are we relying on our own limited abilities, or are we looking somewhere else? It really makes you think.
Thank you for watching our video. Like, share, and subscribe for more.